Months after what seemed like the end, Luna and her family believed they had left behind the terror that haunted their home. Life returned to normal. Laughter filled the hallways, and the icy cold that had once announced Samuel's presence disappeared. But what they didn't know was that not all silence means peace. Small signs began to appear, objects out of place, strange marks appearing on their own, and a chill that now followed Luna out of the house. Only this time, it wasn't Samuel trying to return. A new presence, darker, more patient, was approaching. And it didn't just want to communicate. It wanted to penetrate. When dreams began to recur, symbols appeared carved into the wood, and a harsh voice rang out. The family realized the story wasn't over. And the moment the nocturnal visitor finally showed itself, it became clear. The true danger had always been waiting. Since that night at the lake, life in Luna's house seemed to have regained its balance. The sun was once again streaming through. The windows free of the icy shadow that had previously lurked in the corners. Mornings were filled with the smell of pancakes and laughter in the kitchen as the girl ran barefoot down the hallway. Her parents, though scarred by memories, felt a silent understanding between them. They had faced something few would dare. As the weeks passed, the constant cold disappeared, the toys remained in their places, and the nights became peaceful. Again, Luna resumed her colorful drawings, spoke more with other children, and seemed to be immersing herself in school with enthusiasm. For her father, it was a relief to feel that love and affection were rebuilding their home. Yet there were subtle moments when a distant look would appear on his daughter's face, as if she were still listening to something no one else could hear. Small moments of charged silence, where the gentleness of the moment seemed to be pierced by a memory she didn't share. Time brought a sense of security, almost as if that episode were just a dark chapter already closed. The family began traveling. On weekends, visiting parks, museums, and small nearby towns. Luna laughed, learned new things, was enchanted by stories and curiosities, and her grateful parents saw signs of resilience. Her mother, in particular, strove to fill her daughter with experiences that would awaken her inspiration and emotional intelligence, hoping to dispel any lingering memories of the past. Sometimes, however, in the middle of a game, Luna would stop, frown, and stare at a random spot in the room. She would say she was trying to remember something important, but quickly change the subject. Small lapses like these were common, and although they were infrequent, her father observed them with keen insight. He knew that, in life, silence isn't always absence. Often, it's the harbinger of something about to manifest. One autumn afternoon, while helping her mother put away clothes in the closet, Luna found an old box that shouldn't have been there. It wasn't the same as the lake, but the smell of aged wood brought back a familiar feeling. "Can I open it?" she asked, with that mixture of courage and curiosity that characterized her. Her mother hesitated, but eventually agreed. Inside were only old fabrics, nothing unusual. Still, Luna smiled almost knowingly, as if she'd understood something the others hadn't. "He said everything's calm for now," she commented, returning to folding the clothes as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The phrase, spoken so innocently, left her mother with a heavy heart. The kindness and gratitude for the calm days were real, but deep down, there was a sense that this calm was just a respite before the next storm, and that the wind was already beginning to change direction. The first sign came on an ordinary morning. Luna was getting ready for school when her mother noticed that her coat was cold to the touch, as if it had been left outside all night. Curiously, it was hanging inside the closet in the warmest hallway. In the house, her mother thought it was strange, but didn't comment so as not to worry her daughter. However, as she left, Luna stopped at the door and looked out into the yard, the vapor of her breath visible in the air, even in the mild weather. "Did you feel that too?" she asked, as if it were obvious her mother had noticed. The cold wasn't coming from the wind. It was dense, almost solid, bringing a familiar feeling of loneliness and insecurity. That icy touch, previously confined to her room, now seemed to follow Luna beyond the walls of the house, as if the very presence she had helped free had found another way to get closer. As the days passed, the phenomenon repeated itself. On the way to school, a particular stretch of sidewalk was visibly covered in a thin layer of ice, even when the rest of the street was dry. Luna walked along it in silence, her eyes fixed straight ahead, while small clouds of steam escaped her lips. One day, her father decided to accompany her and felt the same icy wave pass through his body at that spot. There was no wind, no shade, just a chill that seemed to spring from the ground, charged with something unnatural. When they looked back, they saw a small circular mark on the concrete, as if drops of frozen water formed an incomplete symbol. The father, always striving to maintain emotional intelligence in front of his daughter, didn't comment on what he saw, but he kept the image in his memory. And with it came the certainty that the calm was fading. One night, Luna woke up and went to the kitchen to drink water. When she returned to her room, her mother, who was reading in the living room, noticed a trail of wet footprints on the floor, leading from the stairs to the girl's bedroom door. The marks were small, as if from a child, but at the end of the hallway, near the door, were two larger, wider prints that didn't belong to anyone in the house. When she went in to check, the room was unusually cold, as it had been the previous nights, but this time, the window remained closed and the curtains were still. Luna, lying in bed, gave a sleepy smile and said, "He just wanted to know if you were awake." Her tone was calm, almost gentle, but her mother sensed that this kindness hid something deeper, as if the visit had been merely a test for something greater to come. Her father had always avoided recording sounds inside the house since the incident with Samuel, but curiosity and the need to protect Luna took over. He discreetly placed a digital recorder in her room before bed, without telling anyone. The next morning, while Luna was still getting ready for school, he listened to the recording. For the first few minutes, there was only the soft sound of Luna's breathing and the movement of a blanket. Then a voice emerged. It wasn't Samuel's deep, calm voice. This one was lower, rougher, carrying an unsettling timbre, as if anger were contained in every syllable. "I see you," it said. The phrase repeated 3 times, each time closer to the microphone, as if something were leaning over the recorder. Her father, overcome by fear and insight, realized that this presence wasn't seeking affection or reconciliation. It wanted to be noticed but not to help. The next night, while they were eating dinner, Luna stopped chewing and stared at the wall behind her father. "He's here," she said, her tone a mix of curiosity and a hint of insecurity. Her mother asked who she was talking about, and Luna replied, "It's not Samuel. He doesn't like you." This sentence was enough to silence the table. Her mother tried to distract her daughter, but her father noticed that the air in the room had cooled a few degrees, even without a draft. The feeling was no longer one of silent observation, it was one of invasion. It was as if someone were sitting at the table, uninvited. And somehow, everyone there knew that this new presence lacked the kindness or the power of kindness that Samuel had demonstrated. On the 3rd day, something happened that dispelled any doubt about the intention of this new voice. Luna was in the backyard, playing with a puzzle, when her father, from the kitchen, heard a whispered phrase through the open window, "You know what to do." When he ran to check, he found the girl staring into space, as if receiving invisible instructions. When he asked what was happening, Luna calmly replied, "He wants me to go to where the water is darkest, but he told me to go alone." A chill ran through her father's body, not from the wind, but from the certainty that this he didn't just want to communicate, he wanted to lead Luna to a specific place, far from the protection of her family. The first night was Luna's. She woke up screaming, sweaty and wide-eyed, as if she'd run for miles. She told her mother she dreamed of a place she'd never seen before, A narrow hallway with rotting wooden walls and water running down the floor, until she reached a chained door. "He was on the other side, calling for me," she explained, still panting. Her parents tried to calm her, offering affection and words of understanding, telling her it was just a nightmare. But the next night, it was her father who woke up in the same state. He'd dreamed of the same hallway, the same door, and a voice, now clearly masculine and more aggressive, repeating, "Open up." The coincidence was impossible to ignore. And worse, in his dream, the chains were already partially broken. In the following days, the pattern repeated itself. Sometimes it was Luna, sometimes her father, and one morning, they both woke up at the same time. At exactly 3:17 a.m., they described the dream in detail and realized that what changed from one night to the next was the position of the chains on the door. They were increasingly loose. The mother, trying to maintain the family's resilience, suggested it was a reflection of the stress, but internally she felt the weight of the situation. It wasn't just a spiritual connection. It felt like a forced collaboration between this new presence and its victims, as if both father and daughter were being prepared to open that door. It was as if he knew how to use fear and hope in equal measure, mixing apparent generosity with cold manipulation. On one of the last nights before something bigger happened, the dream changed. Luna and her father were together in the hallway. But this time, the water on the floor was higher, reaching their ankles. The sound of dragging chains echoed deafeningly. The door, previously intact, now had a crack through which a cold wind blew, carrying a whisper, "Not long now." When they woke, they both realized their feet were wet. Their father ran to check for a leak, but found none. Only one small detail caught his attention. On the baseboard of Luna's room, a circular mark identical to one he had seen in the concrete of the street weeks before. It was the same incomplete symbol, a reminder that the line between dream and reality was rapidly disappearing. It was a gray afternoon, with low clouds and a biting wind when Luna came home from school, quieter than usual. She sat on the sofa, dropped her backpack on the floor, and stared at her hands, as if trying to remember every detail of something important. When her mother asked what had happened, she answered without hesitation, "He asked me to go there." The "there" was pronounced with an emphasis that made her father put down the newspaper. "Where is there?" he insisted. Luna took a deep breath and described the place she didn't know. An old, dark wooden shed with broken windows and a rusty iron gate, surrounded by tall weeds. Her father and mother exchanged glances. They knew the place existed. It was an abandoned warehouse on the road to the neighboring town. "He said he'll show me what's behind the chain door," Luna added, a gleam in her eyes that mixed curiosity and courage. That night, her father researched the shed. He discovered that decades ago, it had belonged to an old lumberyard that closed after a mysterious fire. Since then, the place had been abandoned, but neighbors reported strange sounds coming from it on windy nights. He didn't tell Luna anything, but he knew she had never seen the place, and yet his description was perfect, down to the subtlest details, like the symbol burned into one of the facade's planks. The same incomplete symbol that had been appearing in dreams and in the markings inside the house. The presence's insistence on taking the girl there no longer seemed like an innocent invitation, but a calculated strategy. It used affection and the false promise of understanding as bait, but it hinted at something far more dangerous. 2 days later, Luna woke up earlier than usual. She got dressed without being called and put a piece of chalk and a small plastic flashlight in her pockets. When her mother asked why she was ready so quickly, she simply replied, "He said today is the right day." Her father tried to mask his tension, but realized he couldn't watch his daughter 24/7. For the first time since the lake, he sensed that Luna's courage wasn't the result of emotional intelligence or perseverance, but something imposed from outside, as if the new presence had assumed the role of a shadowy mentor. The air that morning seemed thicker, as if the entire house knew the next step in the story was about to be taken, and that no one there had control over what they would encounter. Along the way, the symbol began to appear first in Luna's drawings. No matter what she was illustrating, a house, a tree, even a family portrait, there it was, somewhere on the page, drawn with circular, incomplete lines like a broken ring. When her mother asked what it meant, Luna replied simply, "It's the key." Her tone of voice carried no fear, only certainty. Concern arose one morning when her father found the same symbol chalked on the garage floor. He asked his daughter if she had done it, and she denied it, saying that he had taught her to draw, but that it hadn't been her that time. The detail was that the mark on the cement looked like it had been made by something heavy, drag, and not by a child's hand. As the days passed, the symbol began to appear in unlikely places. On the bathroom mirror, it appeared blurry after a hot shower, even when no one had touched it. On the wood of Luna's headboard, an identical mark appeared burned, as if heat had etched the line. And one night, as her father walked down the hallway, he saw the circular outline imprinted on the wall, made of water, as if someone had wet their hand and pressed the shape. It was no longer a coincidence. It was an invasion, a signature, a way of saying, "I am here." And the frequency of the appearances seemed to increase whenever the atmosphere in the house grew more tense, as if the presence fed on every moment of fear and insecurity. The climax came when the symbol appeared outside the house, carved into the wood of the back door. It was deep, precisely cut, and there was no sign of tools or markings around it to indicate human work. Her father ran his hand over the carving and felt that the wood there was cooler than the rest of the door. That night, Luna woke and said, quietly, "Now he knows you can come in too." The sentence fell like an unbearable weight on her parents. It was no longer a presence trying to Luna to a specific location. Now, it seemed to be paving the way for something to cross over completely to their side. The symbol, far from being just a drawing, was a bridge. And with each new appearance, it became clearer that this bridge was nearly complete. It was shortly after 3 in the morning when Luna's mother awoke to a faint sound, like the creaking of wood under slow footsteps. Thinking it was Luna going to the bathroom, she got up and went down the hallway. As she approached her daughter's room, she noticed the door was ajar and a strange gloom filled the room, as if the moonlight had been swallowed before it reached the floor. In the corner, beside the bed, stood a tall, motionless figure, staring down at where Luna slept soundly. Her arms were too long for her body, and her hands seemed to almost touch the floor. The air was so cold that Luna's breath formed small clouds before her eyes. She felt fear, but also a strange sense of being evaluated, as if the presence were deciding whether to act. Without thinking, Luna entered the room and turned on the lamp. The light filled the space, but the figure was still there, only more blurred, as if made of dense smoke. There was no face, just a dark, shifting blur. The temperature dropped even further, and the circular symbol began to slowly form on the window pane, as if drawn from the inside out. Luna's mother took a step forward, feeling the need to protect her. But before she could say anything, the figure tilted its head, as if studying her. It was at that moment that the voice rang out, low and scratchy. "She's already accepted." The sentence pierced her mother like a blow, not because of its threatening tone, but because of the absolute certainty that it was telling the truth. In the blink of an eye, the figure vanished, leaving only the silent room and the air permeated with a damp chill. Luna, still asleep, turned to the other side and murmured something her mother couldn't fully understand, but which sounded like, "I know the way." As she left the room, Luna felt goosebumps on her skin and a racing heart, but also an unsettling clarity. This presence wasn't just visiting. It was laying the groundwork for something greater. The symbol on the window remained visible, glowing faintly in the moonlight, a reminder that the house was no longer safe territory. For the first time since the lake, the mother realized that her fear wasn't just for her daughter, but for the possibility that everyone there was on this nocturnal visitors list. The father, determined to obtain concrete evidence, installed a small audio recorder in Luna's room, hidden inside a stuffed bear. He didn't expect to find anything immediately, but the next morning, when he listened to the recording, he realized he had captured something different from all the previous recordings. Amidst the sounds of Luna's breathing, a hoarse, almost whispered voice emerged, speaking in a low, measured tone. At first, it sounded like a strange language, but as he increased the volume, the words began to make sense. "You are the bridge. Without you, there is no way." The father felt a shiver run down his spine. It was no longer an attempt at persuasion. It was an affirmation, almost a decree. The phrase repeated itself with slight variations, as if the presence were imprinting those words on the girl's mind, shaping her for a specific purpose. What disturbed the father most was the final part of the recording. After long minutes of silence, the voice reappeared, this time with an almost affectionate tone, saying, "You called me first." That sentence left him paralyzed. What did it mean? Had Luna somehow initiated the contact? Or was the presence distorting the truth to manipulate her perception? When he confronted his daughter, asking if she remembered asking for someone to come, Luna merely shrugged and replied, "I was lonely, and I wanted company." It was a confession filled with sincerity, but also with naivete. The father's emotional intelligence was tested in that moment. He couldn't show panic, but deep down he knew that his daughter's simple desire for connection could have been the gateway to something much darker. That night, unable to sleep, the father listened to the recording again. He replayed it so many times that he began to notice details that had previously gone unnoticed. Overlapping breaths, as if more than one presence were in the room. A faint sound of dripping water, reminiscent of the echo of an underground space. And almost imperceptibly, a second, more distant voice, saying something like, "Time is running out." This indicated that the entity speaking to Luna wasn't alone. There was another watching, perhaps controlling, perhaps biding its time. The father sensed he was witnessing a dark collaboration, a layered plan he could barely comprehend. But one thing was clear. Luna wasn't just a target. She was an essential part of what was to come. It was in a silent dawn that the father awoke with the uneasy feeling of not being alone. Upon opening his eyes, he noticed a shadow projected on the bedroom wall, though the streetlight wasn't enough to create it. The figure stood still, motionless, and the temperature immediately dropped, sending goosebumps through every inch of his skin. A deep voice, laden with an almost authoritative tone, broke the silence. "I want to make a deal." The father, still lying in bed, tried to remain calm and asked what the presence wanted. The answer came like an icy blade. "Let me take what's mine, and she will be at peace." There was no direct mention of Luna, but there was no need. The subtext was clear. The child was the bridge mentioned in the recording, and the price of her freedom would be to hand over something, or someone, that the entity claimed as rightfully its own. In the following days, the communication continued. The presence seemed to choose moments of vulnerability to manifest itself. When her father was alone in the kitchen in the early hours of the morning, when her mother lay down to rest in the middle of the afternoon. "You don't understand, there are others waiting. She's the key to all of them," it said, always with the same calculated coldness. But there was one moment that shook her deeply. During breakfast, Luna, without looking up, said to her parents exactly the same words the entity had been using. It was as if she were repeating a lesson without realizing it. The false generosity of the proposal became increasingly evident. It wasn't about leaving Luna alone. It was about opening a path. And the parents' emotional intelligence was tested. Every day, as any abrupt reaction could cause the girl to completely shut down. The final bargain came with a threat. On the third consecutive night of manifestations, The voice grew so close that it seemed to whisper directly into her father's ear. "If you don't accept, others will come, and I won't ask anymore." The psychological pressure was suffocating. The father realized the entity wasn't alone. It spoke as part of a group or something even larger. And Luna was just the first piece on a much larger board. Hope for a peaceful solution was fading, but his determination to protect his daughter remained steadfast. At dawn, he gathered the family together and told them that no matter what it took, they wouldn't give up anything. Deep down, however, he knew that denying it would provoke an inevitable confrontation, one that could cost them far more than they were prepared to lose. The night of the confrontation began like any other, but the air in the house felt heavier, denser, as if each breath required effort. Shortly after midnight, the silence was broken by a metallic sound coming from the backyard. The father, armed only with a flashlight, went out to check and found, in the center of the lawn, the circular symbol finally complete, drawn with something that resembled rust mixed with water. Before he could react, a tall shadow appeared at the edge of the fence, its outlines wavering like living smoke. The voice echoed through the night, louder and clearer than ever. "Last chance. Open the way, or I will open it myself." At that moment, all the windows in the house opened at once, and a freezing wind invaded every room. Upstairs, the mother screamed. Luna was no longer in bed. The father ran, guided by the voice that now came from two places, one deep and harsh, demanding, and the other softer, seeming to be trying to guide. In the hallway, he found Luna standing at the back door, her eyes fixed on nothing, her hand outstretched as if holding something invisible. "He's ready," she said, her tone almost hypnotic. Her mother tried to pull her away, but the temperature dropped so sharply that they both felt their skin burn from the cold. The ground beneath their feet began to tremble, and the symbol in the yard glowed with a pale light. At that moment, the softest voice spoke, directed at his father. "If you want to save her, break the circle." There was no time to think. Driven by courage and desperation, he ran to the center, kicking and erasing part of the design with the sole of his shoe. The effect was immediate. A deafening scream filled the night, coming from all sides at once, and the shadow dissolved into the air like dust blown away by the wind. Luna fell to her knees, breathing heavily but conscious. Moonlight returned to the yard, and with it, the normal warmth of the air. Samuel, or what was left of him, seemed to have used his last strength to help. The girl hugged her parents and said, still trembling, "He's gone, but the other one is still looking for a way." The sentence sounded like a warning, not a relief. Her father realized it had been a partial victory. The bridge was broken, but not destroyed. And deep down, everyone knew that what happened that night wasn't the end, just the first battle won in a war that was far from over. And now, after everything that happened, do you still believe that some stories truly end? How many strange signs have you ignored, thinking they meant nothing? Maybe a door that opened by itself, an object that moved, or that sudden cold that made your skin crawl. What if it wasn't a coincidence? Luna and her family learned that the most dangerous evil isn't the one that knocks at the door, but the one that waits patiently for the chance to enter. If it were you, would you have the courage to break the cycle, or would you remain paralyzed until it was too late? What if this presence wasn't after a child, but you? Think carefully before responding. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications now, because the next story could be the wake-up call you need to recognize the signs before they choose you as their next target.